I haven't been following the news too closely this month, but there were some news that were impossible to miss. For example, the main one is about Concord. Sony announced that Firewalk Studios, which they acquired in 2023, will be shut down after releasing their first game, Concord. So the big question on everyone's mind is, why was this game shut down? There are several reasons, but among them, one major issue was that the game was sold for $40 while its competitors were free. Also, the game mechanics were slow and hard to get used to. At launch, it reached only 697 current players on Steam. Just 697. And actually, there are talks that Firewalk Studios might be shut down or redirected to another project. In my opinion, Concord ended up like this because of the poor marketing. Maybe they had to do more research about multiplayer shooter game industry. I don't know if you have noticed, but game studios have recently been producing movies, animations, and series based on their games. I already mentioned this in my previous videos when I talked about Cyberpunk Edgerunners. Companies are taking these steps to market their games and build them into strong brands, and they are seeing the benefits. For example, after Edgerunners, Cyberpunk 2077 almost broke player records. And this morning I saw that Ubisoft and Capcom is working with Netflix to create an anime for Splinter Cell and Devil May Cry. Personally, I am most excited for Arcane Season 2 by League of Legends, which is coming to this November. Anyway, let's get into our game review. I've played a lot of storytelling games in this month, so we have interesting topics to discuss. Let's start with Guardians of the Galaxy and then move on to Road 96. In my previous videos, I mentioned that Spider-Man is the most modern and well-known game in the Marvel universe. However, I believe that list can be expanded a little bit now. Of course, the game we are talking about here isn't at the Spider-Man's level. Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy is a superhero game set in the Marvel universe, released in 2021, developed by Eidos Montreal and published by Square Enix. I think even those unfamiliar with Marvel can grasp the core idea of the game. Overall, I liked the game, and of course there were parts I didn't like. Let's dive into the details. First, let's take a look at the gameplay. As the name suggests, Guardians of the Galaxy focuses on the adventures of a team that protects the galaxy. The team consists of the 5 members, 1 human, and 4 creatures from different planets. Actually, even the human character Peter Quill isn't fully human since his father is another planet. The other team members include Rocket, a raccoon, and Gamora, Thanos' stepdaughter, Groot, the last of his kind, and Drax, known as the Destroyer. And of course, I'll get into their individual stories later. You play as a Peter Quill, also known as a Star-Lord, who is the team leader also. One thing that might immediately catch the attention of those unfamiliar with Marvel is the witty dialogue between the characters. The humor here is quite prominent, something you don't often see in other games. As someone who follows the Marvel Cinematic Universe closely, I wasn't too surprised by this, but of course I enjoyed it very much. In previous games, we rarely saw companies make characters dialogue both engaging and fluid during gameplay. One of the first to do this well was the Uncharted series, where characters often converse outside of the cutscenes, creating memorable and entertaining moments. Guardians of the Galaxy does something similar. Characters argue, tease, and joke with each other, making its world feel alive. The game does have some unique elements, particularly in the dialogue system. When characters argue, as the main character, you are given the chance to interact with 3 options believe appearing on the screen. You can choose one or simply remain silent. Does this impact the story? Yes, but a little bit. These choices influence minor story details, but there are also bigger decisions that significantly affect the outcome. You are reminded of these major decisions when a notification appears in the upper right corner, indicating that your choice has alerted this story. I like this system because it kept me engaged, and the responses to my choices were sometimes unexpected and interesting. For example, during one sequence, I chose to stay silent during a tense moment, which led to a surprising reaction from the other characters. If you enjoy exploration and interactive dialogue, you will probably appreciate this feature. Gameplay-wise, the pace can change. There are dynamic moments and other times when it feels quite stable. Since the game progression through linear levels or corridors, you might get a bit of God of War vibe, but only because of the structure. It's not an open world game, instead it places you in a contained area to to explore and reach your objective. During combat, you primarily use laser weapons while your teammates assist you. Can you use them? Yes, each player has 4 special abilities that recharge over time. Can you fight without using them? You could, but it would be much harder. You'll find that using their abilities is essential to progression through the game. Outside of combat, your teammates also help you solve environmental puzzles like Rocket squeezing through small spaces or Groot creating breeds, and Gamora can cut some places, and so on. One aspect I found repetitive early on was the enemy design. In the first few hours, you mostly face ball-shaped aliens and jelly-like creatures, which get boring quickly. Later, the enemy variety improves and the weapons you use, including laser guns, start to feel more impactful. Each character, including Peter Quill, has 4 special powers, and one of them is ultimate ability. While the ultimates for the other characters felt satisfying, Peter Quill's just added protective armor, which seemed underwhelming compared to the others. It stood out as a strange design choice, especially since the UI highlights it more than the other powers. For example, Rocket's ultimate involves pulling out of the giant gun, and Drax slams enemies into the ground, so Quill's ultimate could have been more impactful. The game isn't too difficult, with a typical challenge level that you could find in the most games, but not as punishing as something like Dark Souls. You can adjust the difficulty as needed. However, I did encounter a few poorly designed levels, particularly in the explore deeper into the cavern section, which was frustrating and poorly laid out. And actually, there's one thing Guardians of the Galaxy does well, how it handles bugs. In some games, you can get stuck in the environment and it is forcing you to restart. Here, if you get stuck, the game smoothly places you back in the action without disrupting your progress, much like how GTA 5 wraps you out if you get stuck under a car or something. I really enjoyed the first 2 Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and while the game isn't as impactful as the films, it still offers an interesting story. As I mentioned earlier, you make choices throughout narrative, and those decisions shape how the story unfolds. For example, at the one point, you need to gather 9,000 units to save Nikki. You can choose to sell Groot as a monster to get the money, but later on, the game traps you on a planet where you are tempted to spend that money. If you do, it affects how the story plans out, and the characters even blame you for it. There's also a sequence where Nikki creates a happy, dreamlike world, and you can choose to stay in it or break free to continue the story. It is moments like this that make the narrative engaging. However, after a certain point, the pacing slows and the story feels like drag zone. Overall, I rate the game 8 out of 10. It provides a unique experience, particularly in its storytelling and character interactions. What do you think? In this video, I also want to talk about Road 96. I actually discovered Road 96 by accident. While browsing Pinterest, I came across some in-game images and the art style caught my attention. It has a design similar to Life is Strange. Without doing much research, I downloaded and started playing the game. The game's concept is about helping a series of young people escape the country during a period of the political elections. The game is divided into several parts, and in each part, except the first one, we start by selecting one of the young people and guiding them to a place called Road 96. After you do that, the game restarts with the TV announcer's new reports and you choose another young person. You have 3 choices for each character. The character has a health bar and wallet, both of which affect the game's progression. Since it's a narrative-based game where you make choices in dialogues, your decisions impact the story. So every time you choose a new young person, you keep this in mind. As the game progressions, you meet different people who have various effects on your journey. But let's take a closer look at that. There are several characters whose stories you can learn more about. Every young person encounters these characters, allowing you to get to know them better. Let me give you an example. Early in the game, a police officer saves you from you being arrested and you don't know why. However, when another young person encounters this officer, you find out the police officer's adopted child also ran away from home. Although not all the characters have interesting stories, most of them do. Some parts of the game even create tensions, which is a really engaging experience that pulls you into the story. But what I want to talk about most in the game's best feature, the music. The music fits the story so well that sometimes I will turn on the radio in the game just to listen. Throughout the game, you can collect music cassettes from almost every character. They don't have a significant effect on gameplay, but they add to the atmosphere. There are very few things I didn't like about the game, and the most important one is the not being able to see our character. Thinking about it, I believe the game wanted us to focus on listening to the side characters' stories. But personally, I would have liked to hear our character's voice, or at least see their face to form some idea about them. Some of you might already be thinking, if you do the same thing every time, won't the game get boring? Not really, because almost every new young person comes with a new mechanic. For example, one might give you a gun, while another might give you a computer to hack devices, and so on. The game enriches the experience with elements that change your gameplay. Of course, it's not a huge game, but it does what it aims to do at the highest level it can. I believe such game studios should always be supported. If you are not too focused on gameplay and want a narrative-based game, Road 96 might be the kind of game you'll enjoy. Don't forget to share your thoughts about the video and let me know if you have any game recommendations. See you next time.